Or, ladies and gentlemen, silence is one of the most powerful tools in human communication, yet it's also the most misunderstood. Or, men often wonder what happens in a woman's mind when they suddenly pull back, stop texting, or simply go quiet. The truth is, silence isn't empty, it speaks volumes. And women hear it louder than words. When you go silent, the first thing women secretly think is, why? The female mind is naturally wired to search for meaning. Or when a man goes silent, the very first reaction most women experience is curiosity. And this curiosity often transforms into overthinking. Silence is not neutral, or it carries weight, meaning, and uncertainty. A woman may begin to wonder if the silence is intentional, accidental, or situational. Did he lose interest? Is he upset? Or is he testing her? These questions flood her mind and create an internal dialogue that doesn't stop easily. The silence speaks louder than words, and its echo leads her into a maze of thoughts. The conclusion is silence invites questioning. As curiosity deepens, overthinking takes hold, often magnifying small details that might otherwise be overlooked. A missed call, a delayed response, or a subtle shift in tone is re-examined endlessly. Or what seemed insignificant at first suddenly feels like a clue to a larger mystery. Women often connect dots that may not even exist, or simply because silence creates a blank canvas for imagination. In this state, even ordinary events appear suspicious. The conclusion is, the absence of communication magnifies the smallest actions into possible answers. Overthinking also ties deeply to emotional investment. The more a woman values the relationship, the more powerful silence becomes. A lack of communication can feel like a lack of security, leaving her to question whether she is still important in his life. Emotional bonds thrive on reassurance, so silence disrupts that flow, forcing her to imagine worst-case scenarios. This can be exhausting, but it reflects how much she cares. The conclusion is, the stronger her feelings, the louder silence becomes in her mind. Curiosity often triggers self-reflection, leading women to ask themselves if they said or did something wrong. Silence pushes them inward, examining past conversations' tone, or even body language to identify a potential cause. This self-analysis may not always be accurate, but it is powerful enough to create doubt. What was meant to be space can instead feel like rejection, even if unintended. The conclusion is, silence often redirects a woman's attention back to herself in search of explanations. The danger of silence lies in how it can plant seeds of insecurity, once curiosity crosses into doubt, women may begin comparing themselves with others, imagining rivals, or fearing replacement. In the absence of reassurance, the mind creates stories to fill the gaps. These imagined scenarios may not be real, but they feel real because silence offers no counterbalance. The conclusion is, silence without clarity can give birth to insecurities that might not have existed before. Yet, curiosity sparked by silence can also heighten attraction when words stop or mystery takes center stage, and women often find themselves drawn toward unraveling it. Just as a book with a cliffhanger keeps readers hooked, silence leaves them waiting for the next chapter, it becomes a challenge, a puzzle that must be solved. This tension, though uncomfortable, can also amplify interest. The conclusion is, silence sometimes increases attraction by making attention feel scarce and valuable. Curiosity and overthinking also highlight the psychological difference between men and women in handling silence. While men may see it as a way to think, process, or recharge, women often see it as a signal that demands interpretation. Their instinct to nurture and connect drives them to seek meaning behind the quietness. What men may view as peaceful space, women can interpret as emotional distance. The conclusion is, silence affects men and women differently, creating contrasting perceptions of its meaning. The impact of silence depends heavily on context. If trust is already strong, curiosity may remain light-hearted, with overthinking kept in check. But if doubts linger or past disappointments exist, silence becomes fuel for emotional fire. The same silence can either strengthen attraction or weaken security, depending on the foundation beneath it. In this sense, silence is not just about absence, but about how that absence is received. The conclusion is, the meaning of silence is always shaped by the relationship's context. Ultimately, or curiosity and overthinking are natural responses to silence, rooted in a woman's need for connection and understanding. Silence is rarely interpreted at face value, or it becomes a story she tells herself in your absence. Whether it leads to attraction, insecurity, or reflection depends on how intentional and balanced the silence is. Or a man who uses silence wisely can create intrigue, but careless silence creates confusion. The conclusion is silence is powerful, but its impact depends on how it is used. Or when a man goes silent, one of the strongest hidden thoughts that arises in a woman's mind is the fear that he may be losing interest. Or this fear stems from the natural human need for reassurance in relationships, especially when emotional investment is high. Or a sudden pause in communication feels like a withdrawal of care, creating unease. Women may begin questioning whether their connection still holds the same weight, or silence becomes more than the absence of words. It feels like the absence of affection. The conclusion is silence often sparks fear of declining interest, or the fear of losing interest can quickly grow because women notice patterns. When communication shifts from frequent to distant, it signals change, and change is unsettling. Or what once felt steady now feels uncertain, and uncertainty creates anxiety. If he used to reply instantly but now takes hours, or if he once shared thoughts openly but now holds back, the silence feels deliberate. This leads her to assume that passion has faded. The conclusion is, or broken patterns of attention create a fear that love is weakening. Silence often feels like rejection because it interrupts the flow of emotional validation. Or when someone values us, they express it through words, gestures, and consistent presence. Silence removes that validation, replacing warmth with coldness. Or a woman may fear she is no longer a priority, that her value in his life has diminished. These thoughts often multiply, especially if past experiences of abandonment exist. Or in her mind, silence equals distance, and distance equals disinterest. The conclusion is silence can turn affection into uncertainty about being valued. Or another layer of fear comes from the belief that attention may be shifting elsewhere. When communication stops, women may imagine that another person has taken their place, or even without evidence, the mind creates scenarios. Is he talking to someone else, spending time with another woman, or investing emotionally outside the relationship? Or this fear is powerful because silence provides no answers, only possibilities. The conclusion is, or silence easily leads women to assume attention is being redirected to someone new. The fear of losing interest is also tied to self-worth, or silence can make women question if they are enough, pretty enough, smart enough, interesting enough. Without reassurance, insecurities grow louder, or instead of viewing silence as neutral, they view it as proof of inadequacy. A pause in attention becomes an evaluation of their worth, or the internal dialogue shifts from "why is he silent?" to "am I not good enough anymore?" The conclusion is, or silence often transforms into self-doubt that attacks a woman's confidence. This fear doesn't just stay emotional, it often becomes behavioral. Or a woman worried about lost interest may try harder to gain attention, sending more texts, over-explaining, or seeking validation in small ways. Ironically, or these efforts can backfire, making her appear needy. Silence sets off a cycle. The less he communicates, the more she pursues, and the more she pursues, or the more silence seems justified. The conclusion is fear of losing interest often triggers behaviors that unintentionally push him further away. Yet, or silence doesn't always signal actual loss of interest. Sometimes men withdraw for space, focus, or clarity. But without communication, or women cannot distinguish between disinterest and independence. Their instinct to protect emotional bonds makes them assume the worst. Or silence is interpreted through the lens of fear, not logic, because relationships thrive on connection, not absence. The conclusion is, or silence often causes misinterpretations that feed fear, even if no real loss of interest exists. Context heavily shapes how silence is interpreted. Or if trust is strong and the relationship has proven stability, fear may remain small and manageable. But if the bond is new, fragile, fragile or previously tested, or silence feels threatening. The same pause can feel either safe or dangerous, depending on the emotional foundation. For women who have been hurt before, or silence revives old wounds, magnifying fears that history is repeating. The conclusion is silence awakens fear more intensely when trust is weak or past pain exists. Ultimately, or the fear of losing interest shows how much value a woman places on the relationship. Silence becomes a mirror reflecting her deepest concerns, being unwanted, unloved, or forgotten, whether true or imagined. This fear feels real and powerful, or it can strengthen her desire to hold on or push her toward emotional withdrawal if the silence continues. The conclusion is, or silence creates a fragile space where fear of fading love takes root and shapes her emotional response. Or, when a man goes silent, one powerful thought women secretly entertain is whether that silence comes from confidence or carelessness. Or, a man who is grounded in himself does not need constant validation, and his quietness can project strength. Women respect men who are not shaken by every shift in conversation, or who do not scramble to fill every gap with words. Instead, they admire the composure of someone who knows his worth and does not chase approval. The conclusion is, or silence rooted in confidence communicates self-assurance that women naturally find respectable. Silence, when used with intention, creates an aura of control, or a man who chooses when to speak and when to stay quiet shows mastery over his emotions. He is not impulsive, nor does he seek attention out of insecurity, or this self-discipline reveals maturity, which women deeply value in a partner. His quietness signals he can handle pressure without overreacting, and that steadiness builds trust. Or the conclusion is, controlled silence reflects emotional strength, making women view him as dependable and respectable. Confidence in silence also suggests purpose, or a man deeply invested in his goals will not always be available to chat or explain himself constantly. His quietness is not neglect but focus. And women admire men who prioritize ambition and growth. This type of silence speaks of direction and leadership, qualities that inspire respect. Rather than fearing abandonment, or women see it as evidence of a man's mission-driven nature. The conclusion is, silence aligned with purpose earns respect because it shows he values progress over idle noise. Or another reason silence inspires respect is that it resists desperation. Men who feel insecure often try to over-communicate, over-explain, or prove themselves through words. Or, by contrast, a man confident in his place does not feel the need to chase reassurance. His silence conveys certainty. Or, he does not beg for approval because he already knows his value. This restraint is magnetic because it demonstrates self-sufficiency. The conclusion is, or women respect silence that communicates confidence, not neediness, because it highlights independence and inner stability. Or respect for confidence also arises when silence is balanced with presence. Or a man who listens more than he speaks shows attentiveness without drowning conversations in self-centered talk. This type of silence signals that he values observation or reflection and thoughtful action over impulsive responses. Women admire men who can hold back words until they have meaning because it shows depth. Or silence then becomes a form of wisdom rather than avoidance. The conclusion is, silence balanced with awareness reflects intelligence, which commands respect. In relationships, or silence often tests boundaries. If a woman pushes emotionally, she notices whether a man stays composed or crumbles under pressure. A confident man does not react hastily, or he uses silence to ground himself before responding. This self-control earns admiration because it reflects strength under emotional intensity. Or women may challenge men with words, but respect is won when a man demonstrates calm through silence. The conclusion is, silence during emotional storms reveals strength, or making respect grow deeper. Silence also reveals the difference between arrogance and confidence. Arrogance dismisses others, while confidence carries quiet assurance. Or women respect the latter because it communicates humility wrapped in strength. Or a man who chooses silence when unnecessary arguments arise shows that he values peace over ego battles. This composure distinguishes him from those who need constant recognition, or his silence, therefore, speaks of integrity and balance. The conclusion is silence rooted in humility, not pride, inspires respect by showing strength without arrogance. Or the way silence shapes attraction depends on consistency. If a man's silence comes across as cold indifference, respect fades. But if it is consistent with his confident demeanor, it strengthens his image. Women watch whether silence feels purposeful or careless, steady or dismissive. Or when silence aligns with reliability, women interpret it as a sign of strength worth admiring. The conclusion is, consistency determines whether silence is respected as confidence or mistaken for emotional neglect. Ultimately, women respect silence when it reflects confidence, purpose, and maturity. It shows a man who does not depend on constant noise to validate his presence, but who commands respect through calm assurance. In a world full of distractions and insecurity, a man's steady silence stands out as rare and powerful. It communicates strength without words, presence without pressure, and leadership without dominance. The conclusion is silence used with confidence becomes a language of respect that women instinctively admire. When a man goes silent, one of the most powerful reactions women secretly experience is the feeling of longing. Silence creates absence, and absence allows emotions to grow stronger. The mind begins to notice what is missing: the sound of his voice, the comfort of his presence, the reassurance of his attention. This gap stirs desire because it highlights the value of what was once taken for granted. In relationships, scarcity often amplifies appreciation. The conclusion is, silence builds longing by magnifying the importance of a man's presence. Longing develops because silence forces reflection. When a man steps back, women begin to think about the moments they shared, replaying conversations, laughter, or even small gestures of affection. These memories grow sharper when contrasted with quietness, making her feel his absence more deeply. Instead of focusing on flaws or disagreements, the silence pulls forward the good moments that created connection. This mental shift increases emotional attachment. The conclusion is, silence encourages reflection on positive memories, deepening desire for reconnection. Desire grows in the space silence leaves behind because emotions thrive on tension. Too much availability can make affection feel ordinary, but distance adds a sense of mystery. When communication pauses, the mind wonders what he is doing, what he is thinking, and whether he misses her too. This uncertainty fuels attraction, making her crave the return of attention. Desire becomes stronger because the unknown excites the imagination. The conclusion is, silence stirs mystery, and mystery intensifies longing and attraction. The human heart often values what it cannot immediately have. Silence works like a pause button that temporarily withholds emotional gratification. Instead of constant reassurance, women feel a gap, and gaps naturally create yearning. The less accessible he becomes, the more valuable his time and attention seem. Desire does not diminish, it multiplies because scarcity elevates worth, what was once normal now feels precious. The conclusion is, silence turns ordinary presence into something rare, increasing longing and desire. Longing also grows because silence allows women to feel their own emotions more intensely. Without distractions, they notice how much they miss him, how deeply they care, and how strong their feelings truly are. This realization often strengthens their attachment, making them want him even more. Silence becomes a mirror reflecting the depth of their emotions, which they may not have recognized in constant communication. The conclusion is, silence helps women realize the strength of their own feelings, fueling desire further. Desire rooted in longing can also inspire pursuit. A woman missing a man's presence may reach out more, initiate conversation, or show extra affection once silence breaks. The absence makes her proactive in seeking connection because she wants to bridge the gap. Instead of silence weakening the bond, it can make her invest more energy into the relationship. This pursuit is driven by the discomfort of missing him. The conclusion is, longing created by silence often pushes women to act on desire. However, longing and desire only grow when silence is balanced, not excessive. Short periods of quietness create space for emotions to expand, but extended silence risks turning desire into resentment. if absence feels intentional yet respectful, or women interpret it positively. But if it feels careless or prolonged, longing transforms into withdrawal. The conclusion is silence can spark desire, but if stretched too far, or it damages attraction instead of strengthening it. Context again shapes how silence influences longing. In a healthy relationship, silence is often seen as strength or creating appreciation, but in fragile connections, it may feel like abandonment. When trust exists, women interpret silence as temporary space that increases desire. Or without trust, silence creates fear instead of longing. The emotional foundation decides whether silence builds closeness or creates distance. The conclusion is, or longing develops from silence when trust is present to support its meaning. Ultimately, silence holds the power to ignite longing and strengthen desire by making absence felt. Or it transforms presence into something valued, memories into treasures, and attention into something eagerly awaited. But its effectiveness depends on balance, intention, and context. Used wisely, silence becomes a powerful tool that heightens attraction, allowing women to feel the depth of what they might lose. The conclusion is, silence creates longing and desire when it is purposeful, balanced, and rooted in respect.